Charlie join us when he is able. So this constitutes the meeting of the zoning board of the town of Cohasset. It's Tuesday, July 12th, 2022 at 7:02 p.m. Sitting as the board are myself, Woody Chidick, as chair, Dave McMorris as vice chair, Michael Dickey, Matt Watkins, and Lee Darst. Also sitting in will be our clerk, Cassandra Thayer, and town council, Carolyn Murray. So we have about 5 hearings tonight, continued 3 and new 2. The first piece of business is a request. It's been quite a while now from Peter Capozzoli and his attorney Richard Henderson to amend a special permit at 508 Chief Justice Cushing Highway. And we did get a letter from Attorney Henderson, I think it was in all our packets, requesting yet another continuation. They need to see as-built plans, and I think there's been a meeting, but I'm not sure what has transpired with John Hallen in the group. So Cassandra, this is the request is to continue it until September or August?
Until the September meeting.
Yeah. Okay, does the board have any commentary or questions?
I had a thought too, Cassandra, maybe, and if you did this previously and I missed it, I apologize, but maybe we could redistribute that decision, like prior to that meeting, just so we can refresh ourselves. Because I know we've talked a lot about how we're waiting on this, landscape to be implemented. But I think that the bigger picture is are we okay with, it's currently operating with a lift that wasn't part of the plan. The water department expressed some different concerns to us. So maybe just kind of for us to revisit what the decision was and how this deviates from it, because I think a lot of our focus has been on them completing this landscape plan, which has continued to delay, which I know is a component of it, but it seems like there's probably a little bit bigger of a issue for us to digest and decide on too, from what I would gather.
Yeah, absolutely. I can redistribute that.
I think that's a good idea. And at the September hearing, I think it'll be imperative for John Hallen to come in, attend that hearing, and we, having updated our memory bank on the original decision, can then find out from John directly what is being proposed, because it has had a few iterations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would make a motion to continue the hearing of 508 Chief Justice Cushing Highway until our September meeting, which is, do we have a date yet? But we'll settle a date certain by the end of this meeting. So I've made that motion. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, Woody Chidick, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Lee Darst, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Matt, all right. Okay, so unanimously approved. The second is a hearing at 46 Hobart Lane to construct a pool partly within the floodplain. We got a new site plan from the applicant and his representatives. I didn't see anything myself new in that. Am I missing something in terms of any change of plans?
I'm bringing Brendan forward now.
Okay. Charlie Higginson is joining us. So Charlie, you can unmute yourself. Go ahead, Brendan.
Good evening. Board members, Brendan Sullivan with Kavanaugh Consulting, now a division of Merrill Engineers. I'm not sure if everybody's aware of that or not, but John has left the firm, and moved on to bigger and better things, and we've merged with Merrill Associates. So that's why you might see the different plans and headings on our new letterhead. But nonetheless, 46 Hobart, we have been through conservation through a notice of intent and a stormwater permit, and as well as large home review through the planning board. Since the last our last meeting 2 months ago, we had a lot of the, I'm sharing the screen now, hopefully everybody can see that. We had a lot of the pool and patio within the 50-foot buffer to the coastal dune in the rear of the property. We've since moved all the improvements outside of the 50-foot buffer, shortened up the patio. We've actually even shortened up the house a little bit, reconfigured the pool. So now everything, all the hardscape retaining walls and everything is outside the 50-foot buffer. So that kind of shrunk things up quite a bit. There is still a portion of the pool on the southeast corner of the property that is within the floodplain, which is an AO depth of 3 feet. There's also in the northeast corner a portion of the patio that's within the floodplain as well. We are not so this is the landscape plan, which shows in the red dashed outline is the existing structure that's there. So we're actually getting a little bit narrower in berth along facing the ocean for the floodwaters come over the dune, they go around the house, and then they pretty much go out to Hobart and then down Hobart and actually end up heading over down towards Charlie's house over on Lothrop Lane. So I believe you received the revised plans and also a memo for supporting for the support petition under the special permit guidelines for section 300-9.7H. And I think I've addressed all of those issues in that. And I think that's really about it.
Okay, board, questions of the applicant representative?
Yeah, one thing that came up, and I had to, so this meeting was originally in May, and I was looking back at the notes, and so John Hallen had made a comment in regards to the pool's proximity to the house, and I think when he made that comment, I was looking more at the pool's proximity to the side and rear property lines, but my understanding and looking at it a little bit further is that the pool would have to be 10 feet distance from the house wall for electrical and fire safety purposes. And looking at the site plan, it doesn't seem to achieve that. And I know if we were to try to achieve that, it would push it beyond the 50-foot buffer. I'm not sure if you've looked at that issue.
Myself and Sean Pappas, the landscape architect, have tried to get a hold of John Hallen and emailed him, called him about that issue as well, and have not heard back from him. But if we do need to hold the 10-foot setback to the foundation wall, we'll just shorten the pool. We will not move the pool into the 50-foot buffer at all. So instead of being a 9 foot by 21 unit, it might be a 9 by 15 unit or something. Or we may eliminate it altogether. But the patio and the walls will still be maintained there.
Okay. Yeah, because I did a calculation today, and it looked like like you say, the length of your pool could be as short as 11 feet or.
Right. Yeah, I think 10 feet off the foundation gets us a pool of approximately, like, I think 9 by 16 or something like that.
So you are not submitting, you didn't submit anything for this hearing that dealt with that downsized swimming pool?
No, we did not.
Okay. I'm not entirely comfortable closing a hearing and approving a plan that we know, or we don't know, we suspect may well change.
Well, I think John Hallen's comment before was this, that that are advised by the current building and pool and spa code. And I didn't know what that distance was, whether it was 5 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet, or 20 feet. And like I said, I think Sean's on the call as well. He has tried to contact John Howland, and I myself has too. And I know it's been, there's been holidays and stuff in between and stuff, but I have not been able to get an answer out of John about that issue.
One of the things that we're dealing with, and this is Sean Papich.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Just tell us your name, yeah.
Sean Papich is Sean Papich Landscape Architecture, 222 North Street, Hingham. And so the situation that we had asked questions of at this point is, it's a prefabricated modular pool, essentially at spa is what it is. It's almost like the size of a swim spa that you might see and purchase from New England spas. So, but it's precast. So in terms of anything structural, it really should not be an issue located close to the house. We put pools in Cohasset 4 or 5 feet off of an existing building structure. So that was one of the, we were asking is a question of structure. And I think the town has adopted an international bylaw. So we were hoping that there would be some consideration of the site itself, as opposed to just listening or reviewing an international bylaw of code of 10 feet off of the house structure. And so neither structure has got a basement at this point, the screen porch or the house itself. They're really crawl spaces. So if there's anything having to do a structure, it should not be an issue. If we did have to shorten it up and get it 10 feet off of the house, that would put it at about, to Brendan's point, about 9 by 16, 9 by 15. We wanted to enter into a discussion to try to understand. I mean, if you purchased a pre-built, fabricated fiberglass, all enclosed swim spa, could you just set it right down next to the house? Would be one of the questions we would ask. But I think there's some areas there that are grayish that we just wanted to find out more information on. And there's something that has evolved over the last few years that is certainly different than what we had before.
If I may, this is Tom Reardon, I'm the owner.
Thank you.
And, to be very clear, I think viewing this as a pool is probably a strong word. The idea, just being very transparent, is it'd be great to have, kids be able to jump in the cold water and run back in the house and jump in warm water. Family of 4, that happens, quite often, and that would be the intent. So my view, and again, not an engineer, not a landscape architect, certainly not expert on zoning laws, is simply we're trying to get something in that space that accomplishes that space. If it has to, if the plans and the zoning have to, accommodate, the building codes of the town, we'll abide by that. It's not a die on the sword. But to your point, Woody, and just the plans, my simplistic view is this is the plan. The only alteration to that plan would be that pool gets smaller, and if it becomes untenable, then it disappears relative to the plan, not let's go and re-architect the entire design to accommodate a pool.
Right. My only hesitation at this point is that we have a plan that is likely to change, and our decisions always speak to the plans as submitted in the hearing. So I'm reluctant, frankly, to close the hearing, and I'd like to see what the board thinks, but to continue it until our August hearing, and that gives plenty of time for John Howland to and you guys to come to a meeting of the minds, and so that we will have a final plan to approve. I admit it's not. I admit what you're saying makes an awful lot of sense, but I'd like to see a plan that we can approve at this hearing as opposed to something that we've not seen. But I don't know. How does the rest of the board feel? I mean, I hate to drag this out. I'm sure time is money as well, but
That it is.
Well, Woody, is it,
Oh, Woody, wouldn't we usually continue this meeting?
anyway,
regardless of the
for our
sign?
decision. Yeah,
So timing wise, I don't see much impact.
meaning that we could have a draft decision and,
Well,
but we'd have to have, we'd keep the hearing open, so we'd be able to look at the plans and give them our
True.
imprimatur. Right?
yeah, we do that anyway, right? Keep
Yeah.
the meeting open anyway. From a zoning standpoint, are there any zoning considerations about the swimming pool other than that corner being in the floodplain?
No, it's all within the building setbacks. The
Okay.
house,
So if we-
the house is conforming, and the existing house is conforming and the proposed house is conforming as well.
Okay, so if that swimming pool gets changed, and it's either going to be less in the floodplain or it's not going to change, it's not going to move farther out, is that right?
That's correct. It's not going to move further. We can't go further out because of the restrictions with conservation, the 50-foot setback, which is right up
Okay.
against it now, so.
Because usually our decisions say, this is what we think about the zoning pieces of it, and you've got to comply with all the other town regulations. So if there's a building code issue, that's kind of separate from what we're thinking about here.
Right, and you could keep in mind that the portion of the pool that would get shrunk is outside of quote unquote your jurisdiction here, which is the
Right.
floodplain.
Right, that's what I was asking.
So what's your recommendation, Dave?
I mean, I think we're going to keep it open anyway for a draft decision. I don't think that this particular piece of it prevent us from getting a draft decision done for our next meeting.
Right. Okay, but I would expect a final plan to be submitted at that time. You would have resolved any of the other issues by then. Okay, well, I'd make a motion.
and I think would maybe want to get the, I was looking back at, I think the stormwater permit, if we could just get that with the file as well. I know Woody had a question before about, we're getting close to the 30% and he was just looking at the calcs there. So I think it would just be good process to have the stormwater permit, which Brendan, you said you have now, right?
Yes, yep, we got a stormwater permit in order of conditions.
Okay, so that could be submitted to us prior to the next hearing.
And then Brendan, can you just on the memo that you submitted, if you have it
Yeah.
handy, just walk me through and again, to Dave's point, I know this is very minor alterations in the floodplain. I don't have really any issues with the plan, but just explain to me. I kind of reread number 1 a couple of times and was trying to, you kind of say the corner of the proposed pool. Well, actually, if you don't mind, just kind of walking me through the number 1 more time, just for my own sanity.
Yeah, so it is this, as I said, this triangular piece, the corner of the proposed pool, which is down here, because the floodplain is, this type of floodplain is shown graphically. It's not by elevation. It's shown graphically on the flood map, and it circles around the existing house, similar to the one next door. So the intent was obviously to take the existing structure out of the floodplain. So this dashed line here is the floodplain as it's transposed from the flood map. So the corner of this proposed pool is this triangular shape here. That is the only portion of the pool that is in the floodplain. So and we do not, and so as I said before, the way this floodplain works is that there's a coastal dune out here. So the waves come over the dune, they crash over the dune, and then they run, towards the house, and then they go around the house to either side of the house. The existing structure is actually wider than actually the proposed structure. On the northern side, we came back a couple feet. When we're really not changing the grade on the sidelines that much. We're reducing pavement totally around the southerly side. There's currently a garage under on the southerly side of the house, which this is all pavement. There's even some pavement that spools onto the abutting property that we're getting rid of. So those floodwaters will now, instead of be running over pavement, they'll be running over, a vegetated lawn area, which would slow the water down and promote infiltration and all that. And the overall site, we are believe it or not, we're decreasing the impervious by just about 100 square feet. So with all those things being said, we think that this meets the provisions of the bylaw. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
I would
Other-
make a suggestion that anything that's going to be submitted would have to be done at minimum of 7 days prior to our meeting, so that whoever drafts the decision will have plenty of time to be able to review or ask any questions.
Sure. Yeah, that's our policy, but it sounds to me like there should be no impediment to that. It's just a question of sitting down with John Hallen, coming to an agreement of the minds, and then modifying that plan, most likely. But
Right.
whatever you decide to do, you decide to do.
Yep, and we'll get that back to you in time for the 7-day
Yeah.
timeframe. I'll try and get it in 2 weeks before. It's just a
That would be
matter of
great.
nailing down John for a time.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, well, I'd make a motion to continue the hearing until August, was it 15th? And in the interim, we'll be waiting for a revised landscaping/site plan.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded, all in favor, Woody Chitik, aye?
Dave McMorris, aye.
Go ahead, board. Lee says aye. Mike Dickey,
Michael Dickey says aye, Woody.
all right, and did we get it? What did we miss, Dave?
Yep.
Charlie,
Charlie, are you muted still?
Charlie is recused from this
Oh,
one.
he's recused. That's right. Sorry. All right. So he's not voting. So it's a 5-0 vote to continue this hearing until August 15th. Thanks. Okay, we will move on to the third. Either Cohasset Lobster LLC or the Cohasset Wharf. I'm a little confused as to which title, but it's all the same at 46 Border Street. And we will, I'm assuming, hear from Attorney Adam Brodsky, who's representing the owner of his property. Is that correct, Cassandra?
Yep, I'm bringing him up now.
Okay, great.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. It's Adam Brodsky.
Yep.
How is everyone?
Good.
Would you be so kind as to please promote, thank you, I have Gabriel Padilla, Eamon O'Mara, and Tom Sullivan, please.
Okay. Well, I must say, just to start off with, I'm pleased with your memo of July 5th. I think there's some good progress being made. We may not be exactly home, but we're a lot farther than we were a month ago, or actually 2 weeks ago. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Would it be helpful if I just briefly introduced everyone and then teed up what I think is the last issue for discussion?
Okay,
Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Adam Brodsky and I represent Co Lobster LLC. Tom Sullivan is the manager of the LLC. Eamon O'Mara is our project project manager. Susan Hoadley and Karina Martinez are architects, and Darren Grady and Gabriel Padilla are professional engineers. And at the last public hearing, I think we reached agreement that we can use the number of seats to calculate the parking for the restaurant use. And I think we also agreed that our parking calculations were correct, subject to answering Mr. Higginson's questions regarding parking space size and the orientation of the parking spaces. And Gabriel is prepared to present on that issue. The board made it clear, however, that even if we conform to the parking requirements, it wants to see additional parking for restaurant employees. We have a respectful disagreement regarding that. And the board specifically wanted an additional 10 parking spaces using one space per 100 square feet, which again, we respectfully disagree and is not found in the zoning bylaw. As you know, we can't accommodate any additional parking spaces on site. So the board asks us to present off-site or potential off-site solutions. And so we did submit to the board a potential list of options that we are evaluating. Each of those options is going to take additional time in which to finalize. And I believe I'm authorized to offer to the board an agreement that the board could condition the issuance of a special permit on Co-Lobster identifying 10 additional off-site parking spaces subject to the board's prior approval and all conditioned on and approved prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. The idea is that the board would retain control over the parking issue, but we need additional time in which to finalize those arrangements. And because the board would have to approve that, it's secure that it will have final say with respect to parking. Those options included, for example, constructing additional parking spaces at Government Island. And I want to make clear that we're not proposing to take any parking spaces away from any existing users, including the sailing club. We've reached out to town officials to discuss the issue. Unfortunately, we've not been unable to make a connection, but we're pursuing that. And we're also pursuing leasing property at other locations. In fact, we received an offer from a property owner on Elm Street with an opportunity to potentially lease a portion of his property. However, we need to evaluate whether that's possible under zoning. But it's, I think, evidence of the support in the neighborhood for the project when we actually have landowners offering to create parking for our proposed operation. And you also note that Co-Lobster is committed to purchasing electric vehicles called Rivians, which they want to use for transporting potentially employees as well as potential customers. And as I said, under this proposal, the board controls the final approval of any off-site parking, but we need additional time in which to finalize that. Gabriel is prepared to answer Mr. Higginson's questions. He provided an email on July 8th with a summary of his conclusions and also provided a sketch. And he's available when I'm done. Ideally, we'd like to reach at least an agreement in principle with respect to parking this evening. We've continued both our planning board and conservation commission hearings until we've reached final agreement, or at least a constructive agreement regarding parking, because that affects obviously the layout of the site, the design of the stormwater management system and things like that. So in a perfect world, we'd like to reach, again, so conceptual agreement with the board that we've addressed your parking concerns this evening, so then we can go forward with our other permitting. And so with that said, I'm happy to answer any additional questions. But as I said, Gabriel is prepared to present and answer Mr. Higginson's questions.
Why don't we get Gabriel's response out of the way first?
Yes, sir.
Right, and then we can, deal with any lingering parking issues beyond that.
Sure. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Gabriel Padilla. I'm with Grady Consulting. Can everyone see my screen?
Mhm, I can. Yeah, I
the
think so.
questions that-
Make the assumption.
Perfect. So the questions that came out of the last meeting that we had with, in regards to some spaces, it was, space number 1 actually is a conforming dimensions, 9.5 by 20. Same with number 2. Number 13 is an ADA compliant parking spot according to the ADA regulations, as long as there is a 5-foot access area right next to the parking spot. The parking spot could be 8 feet wide. That's what we did there. For a van accessible one, that access area should be 8 feet wide, and that's how we show it. That's how we have it. Another question that was asked was about cars backing into the street. I have shown here pretty much the worst case scenario of a car that will go over the right of way. However, it will not back into the street. The regulations clearly state that they can't back into the street, but we're not backing into the street in this case. So those were the questions that they had. If you have any other questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay. Board, anybody have questions? Or if Charlie could unmute, maybe we could hear from him as well. Oh, yeah. I thought this was unambiguous, clear. But that's a party of one. Any other questions on the part of the board? Guess not. Okay, well, we can always come back to that if somebody is coming in late, but Adam, why don't I've got a few thoughts on what can be done, what you can do, and what you're not empowered to do, but might be supportive. And we can talk about some of those measures which are really off-site in one form or another. But do you want to present, go forth with the fact that you think your parking complies, but you're not given up trying to find some off-site parking? I'm putting words in your mouth, but for employees and patrons as needed.
Yes, sir. Again, just to be brief, we believe that the proposed on-site parking conforms to your parking requirements, and we're trying to address the board's concerns about additional parking for employees. And so we're willing to agree as a condition of any special permit that we have to identify 10 additional parking spaces off-site, subject to the board's prior approval, in order to satisfy that requirement.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me talk about a couple of things. I think one of the issues, and I'll deal with this, is the physical layout of Border Street itself. And you're not responsible for that, nor are we per se, but I would like to think that we could go to the select board at an appropriate time and deal with parking as it extends from the former Mill River Marine all the way down to the Veterans Memorial on the following basis. Request that there be a kind of a physical reconstruction of the sidewalk with actual curbs as opposed to rounded, rounded curbing. It seems to me that rounded curbing invites people to drive up on the sidewalk and park. If you go down to the Common in Cohasset and see what they've done there, those are basically granite 90-degree angle curbs. And there isn't parking on the sidewalk down there now. There used to be. But I think the town has it within its authority to clean up that anomaly. You're not responsible, we're not, but I think it would help if our two groups did approach the select board with that as one of three elements that I'd like to see. I'd like to make sure that there's a 2-hour limit parking to Border Street. I don't know if that will impinge on, how the restaurants are being used, but I'll pick 2-hour limit as a standard, and no parking on the sidewalk signs. Some of that seems obvious, but as we know, it's not clear, particularly if you're coming from out of town. So I think that would improve the traffic situation on Border Street. And as long as all the parties concerned were in favor, I mean, I don't know how the zoning board feels. I would like to hear from them, but party of one, I'd be in favor of cleaning that operation, that up a bit. So that's one thing we can talk about, Adam, and see if that gives you angst or is something that you and your team could get behind. Why don't I put a couple of these thoughts out, and then we can go at them. It also seems to me that you have offered to explore the off-site parking for employees and patrons. I applaud the offer to buy electric vehicles. I mean, I think that's a valet parking, if you will. I think that's a big step in the right direction. The question is, where do they go? And you've suggested a few sites, I know, that haven't been fully vetted. There could be private leases. It could be expanding the Lightkeepers lot, not to add to it as opposed to exchange. And I think that makes sense. And then you cited some other examples of possible spots, such as St. Anthony's. I just draw your attention to 7.2.d, which says that if you're going to use off-site parking, you either have to own it or have it leased. I don't know whether you could get a lease from St. Anthony's. That's not my business, but it just couldn't be, well, there is space. So I think you'd have to comply with 7.2d. I don't want to start creating non-conformities.
Yes, sir. We understand that you're going to need a rock solid, legally binding agreement.
And I want you to understand, I, as a party of one, am certainly not opposed to having conforming or compliant off-site parking. I think that's a great idea. And I think if we could marry that with improving the physical layout and construction of Border Street, that would go a long way to help. The third element, something we did with the music circus years ago, but it wasn't parking related. It had to do with consumption of alcoholic beverages. But for the first 6 and 12 months of operation, I'd like to see a traffic and parking impact study conducted by the planning department, just to be sure. This is not an ad infinitum, every 6 months till the year 2050. It could be triggered if there are neighborhood or police complaints, but at least see how it's working and come back to us and saying we've had no complaints, we've had some complaints, we've addressed the XYZ, just to be sure that everything is on the right footing going forward. I don't think that's particularly expensive or burdensome. I mean, as I say, we've done that in a couple of other cases where we wanted to see how a particular use would perform or impact its surroundings. Certainly with the music circus, it ended very, very benignly. So, and I mean, I acknowledge that the parking situation along Border Street is not entirely of, will not be entirely of your own doing. I mean, that's an area where tourists and other uses have been frequent for a long time. But I think if we could kind of think creatively and cooperatively, I would love to see, for instance, as personally, the space in back of the Lake Keepers expanded. My suggestion, if you want to be, make a nice strong case, would be if you need 10 spaces, why don't you expand it to 20? And then the town would be a net gainer. I mean, it obviously would be a net gain in terms of the attraction of the Cohasset Lobster LLC, but that's one possibility. I think it would require a slight change in the bylaws. 7(1) says such offsite parking has to be 500 feet. I don't see why it has to be 500 feet necessarily. It was so and is so in the village. There's a different circumstance, but I think with either the zoning bylaw working group or the select board, maybe the select board as part of a package could recommend a slight wording change in its bylaw to allow the use of municipal parking spaces that are nearby that are not necessarily within 500 feet. Particularly if you have valet parking, these electric vehicles and things. I mean, I think that would be very compatible one to another. But I throw those three kind of buckets of ideas out, and you could respond. The board could take issue with any or all of these.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're in agreement across the board. I think Mr. O'Mara has already volunteered to participate in a working group in order to address harbor parking generally. And just to remind you, we're not proposing any improvements off our site. So that's clearly within the control of the town. But we've already put our support behind that effort, and we support it however we can. I recognize that we're going to have control over the additional parking. And so I would assume it would be a lease or some formal agreement. I don't think there's any issue with coming back to either the board or the planning department with a post-operation study over some reasonable period of time. And so I think we would support that. The application of the zoning bylaw to additional parking that's not required to meet your parking count. I think we'd have to work with the board, obviously, to address those issues and the town. That's why it's a little bit complicated.
Yeah, and as I started off by saying, you are not in control of this. You are an influencer.
Yes.
I suppose this board is an influencer, and so are some other groups in town. So I don't think it would be right for us to demand that you solve parking in back of the Light Keepers absent any agreement on the part of the town. I mean, that's silly. So we would expect good faith efforts.
Yes, sir.
But I mean, I haven't, this has not been discussed. So the board may be wondering where I'm coming from. I don't know. Anybody from the board want to chime in on?
Yeah, Woody, I think most of your suggestions made sense to me. I think the only one, when you mentioned the granite curbing, et cetera, and again, I know they're only a partner in it, but would you be suggesting, because currently the way that it is, right, is that you can park on a portion of Border Street, the remaining portion remains open to pedestrians, bikes, on a good stretch of it. We wouldn't be looking to restrict that
No, but I would,
parking other than by limiting it to 2 hours, right?
right, but I think if you would have curbing, yeah, I mean, it's, well, I live in South Main Street, right kind of catty corner from the Salty Days. I mean, that kind of curbing is the same as we have down on the Common. all around it, it discourages parking on the sidewalk. Let me put it that way. Unless you're, you know, a real risk taker in terms of your tire's life. I just think it's a safety feature to allow maybe kids on bikes and families with strollers and so on and so forth, patrons of the restaurant or restaurants to walk and not have to sort of detour into the street and be worried about a car, you know, squeezing them against the fence, that's all.
Yeah.
If it were deemed counterproductive in some fashion, because I'm not a traffic expert, I'd certainly listen to reason. It seemed to
I
me
just, you know,
like a good idea, but I don't.
Yeah, I've taken a look at it the last few weeks, and I think, you know, on a nice day, right, that it spans from the bridge all the way down, like you say, to the VFW. And if we over restricted it, I'd just be a little careful, and that, you know, you'd also then start to push some of that volume.
Okay, are you concerned about the 2-hour parking restriction or?
No, I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense, because I do see people, and I think we've talked about this before, that might park there and jump on a boat and go elsewhere for the day. And it'd be good to restrict that, you know, but I don't want to. I think that by parking in half of the road and having half of the sidewalk accessible, even though it gets very busy there, if we deterred it with curbing, it might, you know, I don't know. I'd have to think about that a little bit more. I don't know that.
Yeah, I failed to mention one small, I think relatively small other thing that I guess could go along with the valet parking, and that is at times when the parking lot is, you know, heavily used, I think it would be a good idea for the operation to have a monitor and to not allow parking on their private spaces by the ordinary public. I mean, if you had 20 people, you know, occupying 20 of 35 spaces, then we'd really have a problem. I'd at least like to get the restaurant traffic on site. But I think that, again, doesn't have to be done every day, every hour. It's really at peak periods where you just say, sorry, parking for patrons only, or some such thing. And I think that would be to the benefit of the applicant himself, because he's going to want patrons to come in and not drive on to Situate because they can't find a spot. So it's to everybody's benefit, but I don't know, Adam. I don't think that would be particularly burdensome, and it'd probably go hand in hand with valet parking in some fashion.
Yes, sir. We have an economic interest in having that parking available for our patrons. So either through the use of a monitor or signs, we have to find the right balance. But again,
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason I would like to see us do a study, come back in 6 months, not to pull your occupancy permit. That's not the purpose, but to say what's working, what isn't, what further relief or amelioration do we need to make this more smooth.
yes, we're in complete agreement because our business interests align with the town's concerns in that regard.
Yeah. But I'd like to hear from the board if some of these ideas seem kind of off strategy here.
I think Charlie has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Could you get Charlie, Cassandra?
Is there?
Yeah. Charlie, go ahead. You may be muted. Why don't you just double check?
Looks like. I don't see him as being muted.
I don't either, but I see his mouth moving and no sound.
The only thing I can do from this end is remute him, which obviously is not helpful.
Well, Charlie, you might have muted yourself on your own computer.
Can somebody call him on the phone? Would he answer his cell phone?
No, he wouldn't answer his cell phone. He'll answer his home phone.
In the interim, I have
Okay, go ahead, Dave.
a short comment. I think I'm not concerned about the kind of technical aspects of, say, the 500-foot, proximity to town parking space. I think that requirement is very important when we're talking about spaces that are required by the zoning bylaw. And it's the only, they're counting that kind of space or counting leased space for their required parking. I think here, where they seem to have satisfied the clearly required parking and are trying to accommodate a community need by bringing in the employee parking, I don't think we need to worry about some of the more technical aspects of it.
And so we don't need to worry, we could just leave the bylaw.
Leave the bylaw the way it is. If they have their, if they're 700 feet away, that's fine. They're not violating any bylaw.
Okay, I hadn't thought of it that way. Yeah, okay, I follow you. What else?
I think everything looks clear to me. I don't have any questions. I do really appreciate their efforts here. I think they've really done a good job.
Yeah, and I would say informally that if, in order to, implement a couple of their plans, they need to go to the select board consistent with what is being proposed. Now, it's not a blank check, but I would certainly be willing to go and say, I think this is to the benefit of the town, or at least not harmful from a traffic and safety standpoint, but I'd like to hear from the police chief as well. I mean, I can't speak for the public safety people. But I can say, I think from a zoning standpoint, it comports and benefits the town, but it is what it is. So Adam, you would be willing to come back, we'll say 6 months after commercial operation starts, maybe a year. I don't know if I want to wait a whole year if it's a question of massaging or tweaking an operating plan. I mean, and reserve the right certainly to have you come back if in some subsequent time period there are outcry on the part of the public for whatever reason. I don't know, but
Woody, I think we want to see it cover the summer months.
Yeah, I was
yeah,
going to say that as well, David.
okay.
Mr. Chair, we're in full agreement. Whatever an appropriate period of time is to cover our busiest season would make perfect sense. And in the interim, if there are parking issues, the town always has enforcement rights.
Correct.
So
Yeah, I don't want to jump in front of the police department. No, I think we're in alignment, but I certainly have no problem with the summer months. That is undoubtedly going to be the high season, short of some function or something, 3-hour function. But I'd like to hear from other board members because I mean, I jotted some notes down today. I didn't circulate it. It was coming too late and would violate our own policy. But I could circulate my thoughts since we've discussed them to the board and to the applicant. And but I'd like to, make any modifications to what you've heard. We won't be in full deliberation mode, but do we have any other thoughts on the part of board members? If not, I would ask Adam if he has any other thoughts.
No, sir. It appears that we have consensus with respect to parking, which would, I presume that the board would continue the public hearing until its next meeting in order to formulate a decision. And that gives us the ability to do the final details that we need to move forward also with planning board and conservation.
Is that enough time? Our next hearing is August 15th, which is of course a month and change. You tell me. I mean, well, we can schedule it for August 15th, and if you're on the cusp of something but need another week or two, I don't see any harm.
Would the board want to wait until we've completed site plan review and have our order of conditions and stormwater permit before issuing a decision? Your standard decision says that we are required to comply, obtain all other permits.
Yeah. Well, hypothetically, what if a stormwater permit shrunk your parking down to 28 spaces, totally made up? We'd need to know that. That would have a major impact.
Yes, sir. Highly unlikely, but I
Yeah.
recognize that.
I agree.
I mean, it's a business issue for the clients. I mean, if subsequently, if the board votes and issues a decision and we have to make a plan change, we'd have to come back to the board to amend our permit.
Right. So I guess there'd be no harm, no foul if we, is the planning board and or the Conservation Commission waiting on our decision?
No, we were waiting on your decision because if there was going to be any change in the layout, that would affect, for example, the stormwater design.
I see.
So now that we have an agreement with respect to the parking layout, we can just finish up the few additional details that we need to do to complete those calculations and present them to, again, the planning board and the Conservation Commission. The last time we were in front of the planning board, they were enthusiastic and supportive of the project. So I don't anticipate any issues with the planning board, but obviously they have to grant site plan review. And similarly, the Conservation Commission was generally favorable. We had to do some additional work for them. But again, we wanted to sort of lock in the layout so we could complete those last few items to finish our technical work, mostly having to do with stormwater.
Okay, I'd like to hear from board members, particularly a couple that I haven't heard from at all. Are you comfortable with the layout of parking as described and the next steps that are going to be explored?
I am comfortable with that. I reviewed all the information that was prior submitted and the plans, and I do agree with your suggestions, Woody, as to limit parking on Border Street to 2 hours. I think putting in curbs is going to take a lot longer.
Yeah.
I think limiting parking in that area is probably an easier solution, since it will be easier to implement. It would be a minimal budget item, but I do agree with both of those. And I was down there this weekend, and I do agree with you that the curbs should be delineated.
Or have more definition or something. Right now, they look pretty much as though they're part of Border Street.
Yes, so I do agree with you on all that, and I appreciate that Coho Lobster or LLC has made all the efforts to look at the parking, and because someone did say to me this week that parking is a huge concern in that area, and so I'm glad that a lot of creative solutions have been presented.
Okay, Mike Dickey, as a former planning board member.
I'm happy with the parking as proposed.
Okay, who haven't we heard from? Charlie is still muted. Well, I'm all right. And Dave, you're okay with some of these little tweaks, and
I am. Yep.
and we'll come back on August 15th to do a final deliberation. I think it would be okay, unless Carolyn Murray says otherwise, for me to distribute my notes to both the applicants' reps and to the board, and we can deliberate next month. But this will be a starting point. I'll modify some of my notes from what I've heard tonight. But it's not binding.
No issue with doing that, Mr. Chairman.
No issue?
No issue.
Okay. So with that in mind, and I thank you all very much. I mean, Adam, you have other people in the wings, if they're going to simply reiterate what we've already heard, be merciful. I mean, it's,
No, sorry, I think we got what we needed out of this hearing this evening. Just to be clear, will the board be deliberating on a proposed decision on August 15th?
I would think so, yes.
That would be very helpful to us. Thank you.
I mean, absent some bombshell's too much of a word, but something really radically changed.
Thank you.
Does anybody in the board have a contrary point of view about deliberating next month?
Nope.
Okay, so make that assumption. So I would make a motion to continue the hearing until August 15th, at which time we will review a draft decision and deliberate and make whatever modifications the board wishes to make to those. So that's a motion. Second, David McMorris has seconded it. All in favor, Woody Chidick, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Matt's okay.
First eye.
Lee's okay.
Michael Dickey, aye.
Mike is okay, and Charlie is still muted. Okay, so why don't we move on with that?
Thank you very much.
Okay, yep, you're welcome. Why don't we move on to our next hearing, which is a filing by John and Kathy Lubitz to raise and reconstruct a single-family dwelling at 103 Border Street. They have, again, the 97H, 5 conditions, and an expansion of an existing nonconformity, not necessarily an intensification, but an expansion. So who's representing the Lubitzes?
Chairman, it's Adam Brodsky again.
What a surprise. Okay.
It's your lucky night. And obviously I represent Ted. and-
Do we have a trifecta coming up with the Wariskis? No, didn't see.
No, I believe that Mr. Orenberger's office represents the risk.
Okay.
But thank you again. I represent Ted and Katie Lubitz. I believe that they're available. I don't know whether you see them, Cassandra. I know that Ted was traveling for business. And just briefly, Kevin Arrow, Merrill are the engineers on the project, and Campbell Smith Architects are the architects. But I'm going to pretend to be both an engineer and an architect this evening, but we can certainly reach out to them with any additional questions. And this board's familiar with the property at 103 Border Street because it approved a special permit to reconstruct the existing non-conforming dwelling just prior to the Lubitzes purchasing the property in 2014. And in fact, they purchased the plans for that project, which is comparable in size to what is being proposed this evening, but candidly was just not aesthetically consistent with the historic character of the neighborhood. And so we have a different proposal to present. This concerns a pre-existing non-conforming lot with 7,129 square feet located within the Residence A zoning district. And may I share my screen and I'll try and pretend to display something.
Should be able to.
Thank you. One moment. Can you see the site plan?
I can. I guess it's yeah, down at the bottom, existing and then proposed.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I'm impressed with my limited computer skills to be able to do this. That is correct. The existing conditions are shown on the left side of the site plan, and the proposed conditions are on the right side. And you'll note the existing dwelling on a non-conforming lot. Portion of the lot is also located within the FEMA AE flood zone elevation 9. And you can see the flood zone essentially cuts through the building. The lot is improved with a Greek Revival dwelling that I understand was originally built in approximately 1880 by Portuguese fishermen. And as I mentioned, the Lubitz have lived there for close to 8 years. The dwelling is candidly outdated and not suitable to their family of 5. It's also uneconomic to substantially repair it. And so they're proposing to raise and reconstruct the existing dwelling. The existing dwelling is non-conforming. It extends into the side yard setback to the south. And the attached garage is only 2.2 feet from the sideline. In the A district, we're required to have 15 feet. The front yard would be non-conforming. It's presently 8.3 feet. Off of the layout, we're required to have 20, but under the zoning bylaw, you're permitted to average the front yards on either side. And so the average is 7.65 feet. While technically non-conforming, it's permissible to have the existing structure within the setback. The structure is also non-conforming with respect to lot coverage. It's presently 46.4% and exceeds the maximum requirement of 30%. And the building is non-conforming with respect to building coverage at 28.6% with a maximum of 25%. The Lubitzes are proposing to construct a new dwelling with fundamentally the same square footage as a footprint. However, they're proposing to move the structure slightly further away from the street. The front yard setback goes from 8.3 feet to 8.4 feet, and also further from the non-conforming side yard, which goes from 2.2 feet in this area to 5.4 feet. On that side property line, they're proposing to construct a retaining wall within the non-conforming setback to be able to provide access on that side of the property to the rear yard. They're allowed to do that because the retaining wall is less than 3 feet tall and allowed within the setback. You'll note that they're using extensive use of pervious landscaping materials because they're not changing the lot coverage. The lot coverage remains the same and the building coverage remains the same. And they're fundamentally making the structure less non-conforming. I'm happy to pull up the architectural plans. I just want to speak a little bit about those, if that's all right.
You're not changing the boathouse, I assume?
That's correct. We're only talking about the dwelling. So excuse me one moment. Hopefully you can now see the architectural plans. I'm going to go to the elevations. So this is the front elevation from Border Street. You'll notice that the structure will be 2 stories at the street, and from the rear will be 3 stories, the left elevation from the rear. And I'm sorry to interrupt. Cassandra, did you admit Ted Lubitz or promote him?
I believe I did. I admitted someone with the name of Ted.
All right, thank you. The proposed building height is 33 feet 6 inches, and obviously less than the maximum of 35 feet as depicted on this elevation. The building volume within the setback increases from presently 2,040 cubic feet to 3,948 cubic feet. And the total gross floor area within the setback increases from 476 square feet to 568 square feet. I should note, and I probably should have pointed this out on the site plan, there's an existing driveway which actually slopes steeply down from Border Street and creates a really unsafe condition trying to back out of that steep driveway to get to Border Street. And so the Lubitzes are proposing to regrade that and widen that area. So in fact, the driveway will slope down to Border Street, making a much safer condition. Importantly, the existing dwelling is non-compliant with respect to flood compliance. And the new structure is going to comply with the state building code flood-resistant construction requirements in all respects. Because a portion of the structure is within the floodplain, we obviously need a floodplain special permit, as you noted under section 309.7H. The project will require an order of conditions and a stormwater permit from the Conservation Commission that will ensure compliance not only with the state.
I don't want her computer. This one's defective.
Charlie, we can hear your voice.
Sorry. So the project will be reviewed by the Conservation Commission for compliance with the State Wetlands Protection Act and the Cohasset Wetlands Bylaw, and will require a stormwater permit to demonstrate that we will meet the Massachusetts stormwater standards. From your perspective, most importantly, we believe that the proposed use is not substantially more detrimental than the existing use to the neighborhood. In fact, the Lubitzes have spoken with each of their neighbors with one exception. And I believe you've been provided with 6 letters of support supporting the project. They were, however, unable to speak with the Allens, who recently purchased 99 Border Street to the north, that they're presently fishing. Apparently the Allens don't live at the property, and so they've been unable to connect with them. I should note that the Lubitzes intentionally chose Campbell Smith Architects for the project because they specialize in designing homes which really preserve and highlight historic character. Campbell Smith has done work in other areas of the town. It's been well received, and I'd suggest that they've done a lovely job to mirror the architecture of the existing house, as well as blend it into the character of the neighborhood, all while modernizing the structure to be able to accommodate the Lubitzes and their growing family. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know Ted and I believe Katie are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Board. Dave or Charlie, start off with you guys.
I have a new computer, now can be heard. I have just one question. In the one of the explanations, it says that the Gulf is non-tidal, and I'm a little surprised by that. I think it doesn't change anything except that it is very definitely tidal.
Yes, sir. I'm probably not qualified to speak to that issue, but I do know your point.
And well, how would you respond to that?
You're concerned with meeting the requirements in the 309.7H?
Yeah, number 2. And you say it's not subject to tidal action. The property where the house is going on may be more than 10 feet above mean sea level. Is that the point you're making?
I believe it's not subject to tidal action because it's not an instance where you have ordinary tides which enter onto the property. Clearly, when a flood event, the property does flood, but this property is elevated and I would respectfully suggest is not subject to the ordinary tides. I believe that the mean high water mark is located on the site plan, and I can bring that up. I do know that at some point the Gulf River will not be considered title, but I don't know if that would, I can't answer in that location. But certainly not subject to title action, the regular tides washing over the essentially, above mean high water flooding the property.
But do you have the calculation that shows mean high water?
If I might, one moment, I'm gonna stop sharing the screen. Let's see if it's noted.
And it's not the property writ large, it's the proposed structure.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think the problem here is that it says the land, if the land is subject to tidal action or adjacent to tidal waters, the proposed structure is not less than 10 feet above mean sea level. And your response is it's not subject to tidal action or adjacent to tidal waters, but it is. But it is above the, above 10 feet above mean sea level.
Yeah, that was my point. I don't think it's adjacent is the issue. Is it or is it not more than 10 feet or 10 feet and above, which I think it would be.
It is, so I think you've satisfied that, but that's why.
Your one-liner doesn't accurately reflect what you need to. all you
Yes,
need
sir.
to do
No,
is-
I note the problem.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Well, as Charlie said, it's not,
shedding
doesn't
light on
really
it.
affect anything, but. Because obviously every property in the Gulf River is adjacent to tidal waters. I mean, it's,
Yes, sir. Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm looking at the site plan and the site plan calls out low water, but it doesn't call out mean high, which I'm assuming is adjacent to the existing seawall.
well, you could get that calculation to the board
Yes,
before
sir.
our August hearing. Or, picture or depiction or whatever we want to call it. What else here? Yeah, are you going to have any Concom issues with filling in front of the garage?
Front of the garage,
To lessen the gradient?
I believe that's more than, well, it's outside of the floodplain and I can't do the scale. I'm guessing it's already previously altered. And I can't say whether or not it's within 50 feet of the limit of the coastal resource area, but it's already previously altered.
Well, I remember when we met on this, you said 2014. One of our big concerns was the garage. And in fact, it wasn't just backing out, it's also in the winter. That driveway was subject to icing.
Yes.
And cars have been known to skid down it and not quite through the back end of the garage, but pretty lethal. So it's the right idea. I just don't know what relief you may need.
Understood.
Okay, board. Is anybody concerned about the expansion of the volume within the setback? The extent of? Quiet crowd. Dave, what are any issues that you see?
Not offhand. I'm shuffling around the plans, but I think so far I don't see any problems.
So we can continue this and probably end up with a draft decision, but I would like to hear both on the mean high water mark, which I think is, not a big deal, but I don't want to say that and find out it is. And then also any issues Concom may have with filling in that area or not. It's
Again,
hard to read the plan.
happy to provide an updated plan showing mean high water, which again, I'm going to assume is coincident with the seawall there. And with respect to Conservation Commission, I don't anticipate any issues, but I'm not really going to know that until obviously we're in front of the Concom.
Okay, well, no, I hear you in that one. Anybody else like to, do we have anybody, Cassandra, waiting in the wings, neighbors or?
We do have quite a few people in the audience. I'm not sure if they're looking to speak for this applicant or the next, but if anybody in attendee mode would like to speak specifically to this applicant, they can use the raise hand feature.
Okay, well, I'd make a motion to continue the hearing until August 15th. And in the interim, get those two items of information to the board. And we might be able to get a draft decision.
Thank you. Just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, a revised plan with mean high water. I'm not going to be able to get you anything to satisfy you with respect to, I think, the alteration of the driveway vis-a-vis.
Got it. Okay, that's just to come or to be determined.
No, and thank you for flagging that as an issue. We will be discussing it. But as you said, it makes perfect sense.
So one thing, Adam,
Yes, sir.
I'm shuffling too many papers around here, but on page 6 of the architectural plans, lays out the areas of elevation within the setback. And it shows front, left, and rear. It doesn't show anything on the right. And looking for the application to see if it's conforming on the right or if there's no increase or what.
It is conforming on the right. And so I don't know if you need to know the entire story, but the Lubritzes were able to acquire via judgment, via adverse possession, additional area to the north. So in fact, the house is conforming to the northern side yard.
Okay, because on the application, it shows it at required is 20 and it shows it at 15. But you're saying with the addition of the,
Oh, then I may be mistaken. One moment. Should be calling out 15 as the required side yard, based upon the zoning table.
I think I may be looking at the application for the next hearing. Let me-
It's a 15-foot side yard within there, and the house is conforming. At least with respect to that side yard.
Yeah, and I think you rightly used the garage as the proper structure for setback number 1, so.
Yes, sir.
Okay, anybody wish to?
I mean, it is a tripling of the closest side.
Yeah, I mean, just visually, I wouldn't have guessed there was that much of an increase. Over visually meaning a look at the plan at the elevations. But I'm sure the calculation is right. If the applicant is going up, why, what makes it double the volume that's within the setback?
I believe there's now proposed living space above the attached garage.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, that would account for that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dave.
All right, that's all I have.
Yeah, I know. Okay, well, I would make a motion to continue the hearing until August 15th, barring any one in the audience wishing to speak right now. Okay, I've made a motion to continue the hearing until August 15th.
Second, Charles Higginson.
All right. Moved and seconded. Woody Chidick, aye.
Dave Morris, aye.
Charlie Higginson, aye.
Lee Darcey.
Yep,
Michael Dickey, aye.
Matt Watkins, I.
great. Okay, we'll come to our last hearing.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Okay, thanks. This is filed by Peter and Caroline Wariski to raise a two-family dwelling and reconstruct a single-family dwelling at 49 Border Street. Again, they need relief under 9.7 and 8.7B. So there's certainly some similarities. Who's going to be Jeff DeLisi?
Hello, how are you?
Greetings.
Greetings. Cassandra, on my team that's going to be participating in this hearing are Pete and Carly Wariski. Also, I'm not sure if Julie Johnson is in there. Brian Greenberg will be joining us, as
Okay.
well as Jeff Hassett.
Okay, I saw Brian and I saw Pete. I've offered to pull
Carly's
them
probably-
forward.
Yeah, Carly's probably on with Pete, so it's really a question of Jeff Hassett. And it's possible Julie will not be joining us. I just wanted you to check, that's all.
Okay.
Okay, so who's going to lead off, Jeff?
So it's going to be me. This hearing has started a little earlier than what I expected, so
Yeah.
I'm logged in with my iPad. My share screen is on my computer, but Jeff Hassett's here and he'll be sharing his screen, I'm sure. So just to reintroduce our team, Jeff Hassett, Morse Engineering, Brian Greenberg, our builder, and Julie Johnson, our architect. We represent Pete Wariski and Carly Carter. Both Pete and Carly are born and bred in Cohasset, graduates of Cohasset High. Their families live in this particular neighborhood. They purchased this property earlier this year, which allows them to be closer to their families, closer to the harbor. They're seeking approval to raise and reconstruct the pre-existing non-conforming dwelling. As you indicated, the relief that would be required in this case, or that is being requested pursuant to section 8.7B, as well as since we're in the floodplain because of our elevation, the property is actually technically in a velocity zone. We're also subject to section 9.7F versus through H. This is a residence B zoning district. Per the assessor records, the home was constructed around 1895. It is located on a very small lot. This is about a 3,555 square foot lot. It's obviously non-conforming to area and width. The existing home that is on the property is non-conforming to both the front yard setback and both side yard setbacks. And the house sits on a foundation, presently sits on a foundation, a concrete foundation in the velocity zone. So in addition to the dimensions, this is also a little unique insofar as the property is presently a two-family dwelling use. which is only permitted in this zone under conventional zoning if it has 48,000 square feet. So the challenge here was for Pete and Carly to design a home that improves the existing zoning condition, brings the home into full compliance with FEMA and building code, which means to remove the concrete foundation and elevate it such that the first floor is at least 2 feet above the base flood elevation. Jeff Hassett will go over that. And also the challenge would be to design a home where we can fit the Wariski family. They have 3 kids, so it's a 5-person family. To that end, they're voluntarily eliminating the 2-family dwelling use altogether. So right now, the 2-family dwelling use is proposed to be removed, and it would just be a single-family dwelling use. So we saw that as a positive for the board. They're also maintaining, almost slightly improving the front and side non-conforming setbacks. They're basically building within the existing foundation setbacks, just slightly. When I say slightly, I mean like an inch further in away from the property lines than what it is now. And so eliminating the foundation in the flood zone and replacing it with a fully compliant pier foundation brings the amount of impervious area on the site down from 60% to 29% in a 30% max zone. So we're also proposing to completely eliminate the non-conforming impervious area coverage and to bring it into full compliance. That is likely to result in an improvement of the drainage condition actually on Border Street, because the water runs off the ledge above the property or westerly of the existing home towards the harbor over the street. So the home will be about 2,700 square feet, which is modest in terms of Cohasset. The architectural calculations are found on sheet A2 of the plan set. But the dimensions of the lot, the need to comply with zoning, the requirement to bring it into full compliance with FEMA and building code standards dictate, obviously the give and take here is an increase in the amount of the facade and the volume in the non-conforming setback. In my application materials, I provided a Mass GIS map, which shows that this property or the home on this property is relatively far away from abutting homes, except for the home at 51 Border Street. But there are some significant topographical particularities on this site. So if you actually look at the house from the street, you'll see a massive ledge behind the house and the home at 51 Border Street behind it, sitting above it. This proposed plan would create a home that the roof of which is lower than the foundation, the lowest point of the foundation at 51 Border Street. So the home is obviously lower than that property. Jeff Hassett can explain more, but we believe that kind of eliminates issues that might be articulated concerning light, air, shadows, things of that nature. So we have shared our plans with our abutters, and we forwarded a couple letters of support. I believe the owners of 51 Border Street have reached out and are going to speak and probably articulate some concerns, but otherwise our abutters have indicated that they're satisfied with the proposal. So with that, I'll have Jeff Hassett bring up his site plan, and then Jeff will switch it over to Brian to run through the architectural Jeff, you might need to share your screen on the architectural. I think Brian might be participating via his iPhone tonight. If you cannot do that, let me know, and then I will switch over to my computer, in which case I'll have the capability there.
Unfortunately, I have not seen Jeff come in.
Oh, really?
I've been looking for him, but
Yeah, that's probably because of the 9 o'clock notice time. If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chair, if I could log off and immediately log in off my computer, and then I could do that presentation for Jeff until he gets here.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Think we've lost him.
he may just have to boot up his computer.
Oh, yeah, another guy is doing something or other. What? Yeah.
Hmm.
It's coming in now.
Okay, good.
Hi there.
Hey,
So my apologies. I now have a particular technical issue. See here. Can you all see my screen?
yeah, it's just got an icon. Well, private browsing mode.
Okay. Try this again. Pete and Carly, in the meantime, can you reach out to Jeff Hassett, please? Mr. Chair, you can't see my screen?
No, I can only see you. Well, I can see all the participants, but I can't see your screen. You know, we do have the plans. If you wanted to simply reference, I'm going to page A1 or whatever it may be, that could suffice.
That might be easiest. So. So pulling out the site plan, okay.
Okay.
You're going to see that the existing home, you're going to see a very small lot with frontage on Border Street of about 53 feet. The property is 52 feet in width with 125 foot requirement. The existing house is approximately 1 foot off the front yard at its closest point in a 30-foot zone. And the side yard setback in the 20-foot zone is 9.3 feet and 15.1 feet respectively. That's the existing condition. What we're proposing is a home that moves from 1 foot off the existing, to 1.4 feet off the front yard. And on the side, from 9.3 feet to 10.9 feet on the left side, and from 15.1 feet to 15.2 feet on the right side. The rear yard setback actually conforms. It's about 22 feet off, and we're going to maintain the conformity of that rear yard. So for all intents and purposes, we're staying in the existing footprint for the front and the two sides. We're going a little closer to the rear, but we're staying conforming. As far as the coverages are concerned, I believe I indicated the reason why we are reducing our impervious area chiefly is because we're removing the foundation. And we're proposing to put the foundation onto concrete piers. And so we are bringing it from 60% down to 29% in the 30% max zone. As far as the building coverage is concerned, we're moving from 20. Excuse me?
Yep.
Okay. As far as building coverage is concerned, we're moving it we're keeping it essentially identical, slightly less. And the height, we're staying in full compliance with the height requirements. And so the chief issue here is really the increase in the amount of the facade and the volume within the non-conforming setback. And you'll see the architectural plans show the house. It's more of a beach style home that is being proposed in this particular location. That's because we are going up on the piles and we do need to maximize the amount of space since we're working in a very small footprint. And that's why the home is more of a beachy style with some decking. I believe there's a roof deck on this home. And so that is what's being proposed. As far as the calculations are concerned, we're going, that's on sheet A2, as I indicated. The calculations are the existing non-conforming square footage of the facade is 1,345. Excuse me, that's that's the non-conforming 1,345 square feet. And that is being increased 2,501 square feet. And the volume is being increased from 10,529 cubic feet to 26,464 cubic feet. So the percentage increase of the non-conforming facade is, it's moving from 38% presently non-conforming in the non-conforming setback to 89%. And I'm sorry, the front is 38%, the right side is 89%, the left side is 68%, and the rear is 70%. And so that's the application in a nutshell.
Could we go back, let's stay with A2. Look at the front elevation. When I count the height, I get 37.3 feet. And a 35-foot require a maximum.
If I can field that if you'd like,
Sure.
Jeff.
Thank you. Yep.
So if Mr. Chair, if I'm not mistaken, the height is measured from the mean pre-construction grade, which is 17.9, and it, on a flat roof, it goes to the roof surface and does not count any appurtenances such as, I believe railings are expressly excluded in the height definition. I don't have that language right in
Oh,
front of me. But
if they're not more than 5% of the total. Let's see, I got the height definition right here.
Great.
This is on a flat roof, height is measured to the top of the parapet of the top of the main roof surface, whichever is higher. The limitations of this clause shall not apply to projections not used for human habitation, which in the aggregate do not exceed 5% of the roof area, including, without limitations, chimneys, antennas, railings, and cupolas. So it's got to be 35 feet to the top of the main roof surface, top of the parapet. And you can exclude up to 5% of the roof area devoted to non-habitable structures. But when I look at it, now it's not a huge deal, but it's creating a variance. The way I count it.
do you believe that the railings in the aggregate exceed 5% of the roof area? Is that I just want to make sure I understand. Is that
I don't believe anything. I mean, I don't have any calculations.
right? I guess, is that what you're asking, is maybe the
But
proper phrasing?
But I'm trying to see the shingled stud hall, tempered glass panels. Those look like solid structures. And the line on A2 kind of tops out at 37.3 feet.
Yes, those are intended to be used as railings. And they could certainly be replaced with actual railings if that were to solve the variance, if there in fact is a variance. The reason for the shingled wall and tempered glass panels is an issue of safety. So even a code compliant railing system with little kids, I think the architect was concerned about a potential safety issue there, which she noted several times during the design discussions.
Right.
So I mean, I could.
But you want to
certainly-
avoid a variance. Situation.
Completely agree. And I think it would be relatively straightforward to calculate the aggregate area of the railing system there.
So in other words, there's a hollow. Yeah, I don't know how that would.
I mean, my reading of I don't know if there's cases to reference here, but my reading of the plain language would be you would take the sort of cross-sectional area of a railing and then multiply by the linear.
Yeah,
footage.
maybe a bird's eye view down to show us what that very top of the building looks like. Is it covered? It sounds like from your testimony, it's not covered. So
The building itself?
Yeah.
Oh, if you go to I believe it would be the first page of the plan. It's an open roof deck. So if you go to, let me see the title of that sheet. That would be A1.
Yeah, let me see if I can find A1 because A1, I got A1. Yep, okay.
It's the bottom left, Woody.
Yeah, okay, I see, okay. You better do the calculation, but I understand.
Okay. If Jeff joins us when he takes over, I understand you'd obviously want something formal, but I could back of the envelope this fairly quickly.
That's okay. I mean, no, I think, it either complies or doesn't comply. So why don't you can get that to us, that calculation to us.
Okay.
And if necessary, you'd have to make some, I think, very minor adjustment in height or whatever, but I can't tell exactly.
Yeah, so there would be, I mean, off the top of my head, I can already think of 2 or 3 different solutions that would satisfy that requirement.
Yeah, I mean, not to be terribly picky, but I mean, height is something that we're very much concerned about. And I wouldn't.
No,
want
I understand it's a point of emphasis here.
Yep. Okay, well, we can move on because that's just a question of giving us the calculations and if they exceed 5%, you can figure out some creative way to reduce it.
And just to point out, if we had gone with, so part of the reason, and we did discuss this with Julie, the architect, quite a bit. So if we had gone with a more traditional gable roof here, we actually would have been permitted to go up another, I'd have to look and see what it, but at least another 4 feet, because then we'd be measuring to the midpoint of the rafter, or 40 feet, which in this case, 40 feet to the ridge would be the controlling factor there. So the flat roof was actually, we viewed it as a positive for kind of everyone, that the Wariskis get a little extra space in a fairly tight house for a family of 5. And then abutters get a structure that's, 4 feet shorter, which, I understand we're fighting for every inch here. So just one more kind of consideration to throw out, because it was discussed quite a bit.
Okay, well, I don't think we can answer that here.
Or now.
But
Yeah, well, yeah.
no,
let's
you
go
have
for
the option of a slope roof, but the max to the ridge line is 40 feet. So you wouldn't
Right.
be gaining a lot. You'd probably be losing some, not gaining, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We felt it was a win-win where you'd sort of have a taller structure, but you'd lose some of that exterior
Okay, well,
living space.
just come in with something that's either revised, or if not revised, that it clearly depicts something that conforms to the bylaw. That's all.
Mhm.
We don't.
I did
have
just
to
hear from
belabor it.
Jeff. He is here now. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm jumping on late, but Jeff Hassett here with Morse Engineering. If you have any questions related to the site plan.
Jeff, I see you. Oh, there we go.
We have a similar situation here and a couple of other projects in the last few months or weeks, which is the extent to which the non-conforming facade and volume are expanded. There's no magic number. But I don't know, does the board feel this is those are sort of de minimis increases? Or are they significant?
The real question, Woody, would be, are the increases substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood? Right?
Yeah.
Woody, I was going to say, as we all know, that Border Street area is, very tight and all of the homes down there, cheek by jowl, and you know, it's all kind of crammed in there, and that's the way it's been. So I do think, you know, you have to take into consideration the character of the neighborhood, and they're all kind of jammed in on each other, and it's everything's tight down there, you know?
Yeah, just to push back a little, but this is a small house being made much larger, and so its appearance and impact in the neighborhood might be different. I mean,
I understand, Woody.
well, how do other board members feel?
Well, I certainly think that the increases are not de minimis. Are they harmful to the neighborhood? That's another question which we will discuss when we make our decision.
Anybody else on the board?
Where is the driveway and parking on this map?
Sure, so they currently have a paved driveway on the, if you're looking at the property from Border Street, it's on the right-hand side. And the intent is that driveway will remain in service of the new home as well.
How many parking spot, how many cars can they park in that driveway?
2 back-to-back. So I would see this as a reduction in the demand for parking, as it would only be 1 family now instead of 2 families.
Okay, so Lee has spoken. Matt or Mike or Dave?
No, I don't have too much to add on it, Woody.
Yeah, I'd like to hear, I know that someone mentioned that there was a neighbor that was going to comment. I'd like to hear that.
They are waiting to speak. If you'd like to open it up to the public.
Sure, I didn't know if the board had any kind of initial comments here. If not, we can open it to the public. All right, let's open it.
Hello, everyone.
And for the record, if you would give us your name and address, that would be appreciated.
Sure, yes. My name's Dawn Massa Stankavish. My aunt Georgiana Massa lives at 51 Border Street, and asked and sent a letter ahead of time requesting that I represent her this evening.
Okay.
May I, Chairman, please share my screen? I have a couple of visual that add to what I need to say on her behalf.
Sure, sure.
Thank you so much. One moment, please. Okay. Can everyone see?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Okay.
I've got a title page here.
Yep. Okay. So thank you for letting me share this information this evening, everyone. I just want to give a brief background. Georgiana Massa lives at the residence, which she bought from Charlie Humphreys in 1990. The Massa family has been longtime residents in Cohasset since the 1950s after moving here from Cleveland Heights, Ohio. And Georgiana also has a history of being an artist herself, and has very much enjoyed a peaceful life at the top of the rock that's adjacent to 49 Border Street. Presenting on her behalf tonight, this is just a little bit about me and the letter that she signed giving me permission to represent her and our family home. I just wanted to point out, in addition to doing that for her professionally, I'm also on the board of the Sanctuary Advisory Council for NOAA and the Board of Trustees for the South Shore Conservatory. She also said in this letter that my father, Don Massa, who is also online, that may want to speak after I do, is also on the board of trustees for the conservatory and has a long history of being on the board for Northeastern University and is an engineer himself. So basically, why would anyone want to live in Cohasset? This is a gorgeous view of the harbor. Obviously, it's a beautiful place. We all love it. We all have a history here. Why do we have zoning regulations? If you saw the movie Up, you'll recall how the little house was overwhelmed by skyscrapers being built around it. Zoning is supposed to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community. We're here tonight because the Wariskis feel that these reasons for zoning in their property that they purchased don't apply. Even though Pete is a managing director at Cushman and Wakefield, he purchased a home knowing that it was non-compliant in the zoning regulations. According to the Morse Engineering Company's document that my aunt received, that says the lot of land is only 3,555 square feet. As you can see from this is the information taken from the documents that the Wariskis presented in the plans. This is what they said is already existing out of conformance. And this is the proposed number that they're saying. However, what we found when we're looking closer at these plans, if you look here, if you can see where my cursor is, the structure in question is counting as part of the footprint, the front porch. I don't believe that that counts as part of the regular footprint. And in this picture here, the green is what would have been conforming in the existing structure. And this pink is going above and beyond it height-wise, but they're not even counting the roof deck, which Chairman, you very nicely pointed out. The footprint is erroneously misleading with including that front porch, which actually extends out 5 feet. So instead of it just saying this purple part, instead of just saying that the purple portion is adding 3 additional feet to the rear, they're actually expanding the footprint an additional 8 feet. The height, the existing plans are minimizing the reality of the impact of the additional height in the white areas, like I mentioned, and you know, by changing the foundation, it was a little bit unclear from what was presented to us ahead of time exactly what that would mean there. But it was already unconforming and is going above and beyond. And from this point, like you mentioned, to here, even in the drawing, it said that this white part was 4 feet for the wall, but if people are standing up there, they're going to be much higher than that too. So I don't know what that really means, but the volume issue has me more concerned, because what all of this actually appears to me is that the structure will appear from the street to be a giant block. The volume on the top deck adds an additional 4,000 cubic feet to the top. What this means is the proposed 26,474 non-conforming cubic feet is inaccurate, and actually 4,000 cubic feet more, bringing the total volume beyond 30,000 cubic feet beyond regulation. This also affects the perceived appearance and height of the building. And again, the lot itself is only 3,555 square feet. So this is going to be a structure that's going to engulf the entire plot of land. So, you know, someone had mentioned from the board that it's crammed in that area. You could see the home, you know, in that picture. Right now, it's not crammed at all. But my aunt's house, our family property, is directly above it. But this clearly upsets the beauty and ambiance of Cohasset Harbor. Instead of preserving and promoting everything that makes the seaside New England charming and beautiful, these plans threaten the atmosphere of Cohasset Harbor with a cityscape. So, you know, this is again a close-up of the plans. This is the block itself that is being proposed. You know, it was called a beach house. It doesn't really look like a beach house to me, because the only thing that could come to my mind was this. And I really don't think that this fits into Cohasset Harbor. And, you know, I'm all for, you know, wanting a family to have space, and we're very happy that if the Wariskis really are intending on staying in this home, you know, it's just unfortunate that it went from conversation straight to, you know, a plan that, okay, if you're not gonna work with us, we're gonna go to the full max that we think that we could get away with. And, you know, what will this really do here? And in this picture, this is my family home right here. This is a rock cliff. This is a retaining wall. The proposed plans are going to have it moved back. I'm concerned about what would the construction do. You mentioned taking digging up the foundation. Next slide gets into how that affects the FEMA zone. But, you know, it just doesn't have the proper physical space for what's proposed. And to say it's only a little bit outside the existing footprint is a gross exaggeration. These pictures kind of show it all. Here's the plot of land right here where my cursor is. That's 49. This is 51. This is the sky view from the Wariskis documents. This red line is roughly where the property line, but it's also directly where the cliff is. And that's, you know, very rough, but it gives you a visual of, as the crow flies, how closely these homes are already to each other. And the fact that it's not just a flat surface here, it's a rock cliff is what is very concerning. So in this.
Could you just take a breath for a second?
Sure.
Why does a rock ledge concern you, or why should I be concerned?
Oh, thank you for asking. I'm happy to answer that. Because whatever proposed means of construction with heavy machinery or any other thing that might be needed to dig up a foundation in a rocky area, where it's all granite and it's all kind of, you know, stuck close together. If anything cracks within that rock cliff, the structural integrity of my family home is immediately affected. And it's also, you know, it's a harder location to do any repairs to. If you damage that rock cliff, I don't know how you'd even go about fixing that. If that integrity gets damaged and the house gets shooken up and, you know, the pipes and everything are also damaged, you know, that's a huge liability. I'm concerned for my family members' well-being. I'm concerned for her mental health, her psychological health, her physical health. And I'm concerned the fact that all of her utilities are right going from the street between the properties up to her house as well. And it's a weird layout of how those things are because of the rock that's there. It just makes me very concerned over lots of different things and how it could impact her life and the actual property that my family holds. Okay. This map shows right here where the FEMA zone is. And, you know, obviously being a part of NOAA, I'm concerned about PFAS, lead, asbestos, other pollutants that are going to run off into the watershed. And the plant and animal life. Also professionally with the sonar work that we do, we create products that actually are used to help the environment, help whales, help all kinds of things, as well as our shoreline defense. So, you know, I have a lot of tie-in, like my whole professional career has to do with improving the coastal area. So this hits very close to home, quite literally, for me and for my family. So just please note all of those things. This is the existing view from the Massa family home. As you can see, this is the existing roof. This is the rock. This is how close it is. So when you talk about going up higher, and oh, this is what it would be. This is a rough idea. They're saying an additional 16 feet above the roof, the existing roof here. That would bring it up like ballparks around here. You know, what does that do to the You know, if there's a rock cliff here too, and you're building this close to it up high and back further, I just don't understand how you're gonna do that and not shake up this property. I just don't get it. And then this is her foundation. You can see it's directly, my aunt's foundation, the family home, is directly out of the rock on top. So all of this is directly tied together from the structure of the landscape. So if you're going to disturb this, it could be very detrimental. And when I said here, a brief story of what happened, my in-laws lived in New Jersey. A home was built too close to their house. It cracked their foundation. It was condemned. My elderly grandmother-in-law had to be physically removed professionally by ambulances because of what they did. If you think that I want to sit and let this happen to a family member, you're out of your mind. I can't do this again. I already went through this, and it wasn't even as dangerous as what this is. So in business, we assess risk every day. Is moving forward with a building plan that proposes an approximate volume increase exceeding 30,000 cubic feet beyond what is presently allowed by existing regulations of risk worth taking. I really wonder that. And then obviously, this is the last slide. The intention behind grandfathering in an older home is to make an exception for something that predates a regulation. The integrity of a home built in 1895 is vastly different than the proposed plans. One needs to make accommodations, modernizations to an older home that is grandfathered in. One should honor the original spirit and intent of why the structure was allowed to remain outside of regulation. One should not be allowed to take advantage of this special exception, but be required to honor it in the remodeling building plans by not exceeding the footprint and height allowances. So this is still the scope page from the town of Cohasset. A is about, why you have these zoning laws. It promotes health, safety, convenience, and welfare of the inhabitants of Cohasset. You know these, I don't need to read it to you, but in this case, my point A correlates to that point A. Construction near a FEMA zone and Cohasset Harbor, as well as the already existing traffic and construction going on in the Cohasset Harbor area, threatens the environment. We spent the evening listening to other cases having to do with the parking issues, and we already know the existing building and construction in that area is completely overwhelming. I really don't know if you want to add to that. It's a lot of stuff that's happening down there, and I think some of it is for the better, some of it isn't necessarily worth doing in the ways that are being presented, and definitely not right now. So, even the house that you talked about in the previous case, they were actually suggesting staying within the footprint and maybe expanding it a little bit, but it was within the integrity of the original house. That's not the case here. This is a gross exaggeration of how far can we build something and still fit it in this tiny plot of land. So, and the surrounding rock, any construction or impact to the surrounding rock detrimental to structural integrity, pollution. Point B, threatens health. Point B on the Cohasset page is to conserve health. The noise and construction encroachment of the proposed plans also greatly threatens the emotional and potentially physical health and well-being of family members in that home. The value of the abutter's property is decreased by imposing encroachment on a new structure and potential damage to utility lines, power, water, et cetera. And there's undue congestion I talked about, threat to water contamination, which I talked about. And F, the preserve and protect the outstanding characteristics and natural beauty of the town with due consideration given to the geography, topography, and history of Cohasset. Cohasset's harbor's natural outstanding characteristics are greatly threatened by the proposed plans. A historic building from the 1800s will be replaced by a giant edifice crammed into a tiny lot, more than doubling the existing size of the current home. All negative space will be filled in with a massive rectangular block that doesn't fit in with the surroundings. And boats from the harbor will see a building that looks like a city project sticking out like a sore thumb as part of the coastal landscape of the otherwise gorgeous, picturesque, and desirable Cohasset Harbor.
That's a great presentation. Would you be able to get us what we need, as a matter of fact, each of us on the board, a full copy of your presentation,
I would be more than happy to send it along,
because it's
sir.
now a public document. Would you go
Yep.
to the next to the last page?
Yes, one moment, I'll get it back up. Boop, boop.
Yeah, the one before this one.
Yep, here it is.
Okay, and let's go to the second paragraph. I'm not sure I understood. The building plan that proposes an approximate volume increase exceeding 30,000 cubic feet beyond what is presently allowed by existing regulations. What existing regulations are you referencing?
I'm
Yeah.
referencing the zoning regulations that is referenced here. So what they're saying in the non-conforming volume, they're saying 26,474. But what I said here was that because they didn't count the top deck as part of that, and that calculation is approximately 4,000 cubic feet. So that should be added to the 26,474, which it is not in their plans. So that brings it to a total volume beyond 30,000 cubic feet beyond the regulations.
And the regulations being the pre-existing non-conformity.
Exactly. That's the 30,000 proposed additional. It'll be, instead of, like, right now, it's here. Instead of this, that's a misleading number because they didn't count the top deck.
Yeah, well, certainly just sitting here would seem to me they have to count the
Thank you.
top deck. That's volume. And it's volume for human habitation. Whereas the bylaw says, deals with non-habitable. So it's habitable. There's no question.
Woody, if I
Yeah.
may, thank you. As we're listening to the presentation, I'm recalling a conversation that we had with the board, which involved the building inspector, Mr. Hallen, on the Ryan Stasco property, the Jerusalem Road property over there.
Yeah.
And there was a discussion about a roof deck. And I believe Mr. Hallen expressed an opinion that because it was not covered, it doesn't count as part of the calculation. So we might want to check the building
Yeah, Jeff,
inspector on
I
that.
don't see it in the bylaw. That's the problem. That may be his interpretation, but it's not the way the bylaw is written.
Except that he is the only person in the town who's charged with the authority of enforcing the bylaw.
Well, we're charged with enforcing the bylaw too.
Right, but he makes the first interpretation, and depending on his interpretation of that, the determination is made and brought before the board, right?
Right, and we could accept or deny that interpretation. We don't have to accept his interpretation.
So where in the bylaw does it say that the deck, in order to be counted as habitable space, how do you count habitable space which is uninhabitable in the wintertime?
It's still habitable. It's habitable in the summer. I'm not saying it's 365 days a year, 24 hours.
But to that point, it's a deck, and you would not include the area of a deck as habitable space.
Excuse me, though, then why was the porch included in as part of the footprint? Number one.
Because
And
the
number two.
porch is covered.
Number
So if I may on that,
wait a minute. Number two, what we all just saw throughout COVID is outdoor space was being inhabited throughout the pandemic as the only place where people could socially gather. So if all they have to do is purchase an accessory like a fire pit or something, bring it up there, have some outdoor heaters, and they're inhabiting that space throughout the winter.
Sure. If I may, would it be okay if I share?
Jeff,
my site plan?
I think you're certainly, I would encourage you, in fact, to put down your argument in writing And Dawn can expand perhaps in her interpretation as well, but I don't think it's cut and dried that I could build a deck that's 20 feet high on top of a building and it's still okay. I don't think so.
Well, is a deck considered a structure, an uncovered
Yeah.
deck considered a structure?
I don't think there's
For
anything that says it has to be covered.
For purposes of setback?
A structure, let me see.
Yeah.
Right? For purposes of setback, though, does the town of Cohasset consider an uncovered deck as part of its setback?
Yes.
Yes. Structure, a combination of materials combined at a fixed location to give support or shelter, such as a bin, a bridge. Bridge doesn't necessarily have a roof. A building, a dock. Docks don't have roofs, fences, frameworks, flagpoles, platforms, retaining walls, reviewing stands, stadiums, swimming pools, etc. Nothing that says that a structure has to have a roof to it.
Yeah, I think if you're, to kind of narrow this down, if it's attached to the house, if it's not included as a permitted projection, then it has to be inside the setback, or it's non-conforming.
So I agree with that. If I can share my screen and address some of the engineering concerns that were brought up, would that be okay?
Well, let me say, Don, are you, at least for the moment, done, or do you want?
Yeah, I just want to stress that everything about this is non-conforming. And that's just why we're all here. There isn't a single thing that's proposed that's within the conforming allowances.
Right, and we have some discretion to extend a nonconformity, but when it gets, there is a question of degree or magnitude that gets us concerned. But at any rate, Jeff, why don't we turn it over to you then?
Sure, thank you very much.
The other Jeff.
So on the site plan, this property, as you know, is on the westerly side of Border Street, with the Atlantica, or formerly the Atlantica parking lot, directly across the street beyond to Cohasset Harbor. The Massa property is shown on the site plan to the west as well. So the site plan does correctly label the front yard setback measured to the existing porch. This is a front porch with a roof over it. So the front setback is indeed measured to that. Typically, we do not include outdoor space in the floor area. However, if you looked at the assessor's card currently, to look at the finished area, it would not include the porch area, and certainly not decks. The house that's being proposed is 2,600 square feet, not including the deck. So it is consistent with other homes in the neighborhood. It's not a monster home. The footprint is 24 by 42, which is the same size footprint as the existing home. I understand we are going up. As far as the height, so the first floor we're proposing at the lowest elevation fees allowed, because the property is in a FEMA floodplain. And then with the flat roof is elevation 52. The site plan shows topography offsite based on LiDAR topography, which usually is generally very accurate. The contours aren't labeled on this plan, but I can tell you that they vary from elevation 52 to 64. So the point is that the ground immediately adjacent to the Massa home is slightly higher or much higher in elevation, or several feet higher in elevation, compared to the roof of the proposed structure. And I can show you another photo from here we go. Here's another photo. So the property immediately behind the home, it's a ledge face, and it's very steep up to the Massa property. For that reason, they sit higher. With respect to that ledge face being destabilized, we're not proposing to destabilize or alter that ledge face at all. The house is within the footprint of the existing home, with the exception of 2 feet beyond it to the rear. And it's not going to have a full foundation. So we're not talking about a massive ledge removal operation for a basement for a full foundation. It's simply going to be supported on concrete piers, which they will excavate down to ledge and then drill it with steel, with rebar into the ledge. So I really am not concerned that this project would alter or destabilize that ledge face behind the house. And certainly the project is not going to interfere with any of the utilities servicing the home either. So that was just a list of a few things that I wanted to comment on. With that, I'll turn it back to you.
Good, and Jeff, as we're going through this, if you would commit that to writing, that would be
Sure.
very helpful so that everybody can get an accurate depiction of what you're saying. Okay, got it. All right, well, I think because we have not had a chance to peruse the Don's presentation, there've been some arguments made and counter arguments made. I certainly think we've got to continue this hearing until next month to consider this and any other arguments that may be forthcoming. This is hardly a slam dunk, in my estimation. So I think we owe it to everybody to study the plans anew and get the data that we want on the open roof deck, which is a structure, and so on and so forth, and then see where we go from there. So does the board have are there other people, waiting in the queue, Cassandra, would like to speak?
I know there is potentially one other. I'm gonna pull them forward.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I want to go through this in more detail, and interesting as the presentation was, I want to sort of study the data embedded in it. So you're okay.
They have been pulled forward.
I'm not sure he knows that he's muted.
Can you, well, he can listen in. Can you unmute yourself, Don Massa?
Can you hear me?
Yep, now.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, for the record, your name and address, please.
And my name is Don Massa. I'm Don's father and Georgiana Massa's brother. And my concerns here are obviously the same as what Don's were. I've just been listening to the whole.
You're fading out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was listening to the whole presentation. And I just want to make a couple of minor overview comments on what I heard, because when you get into these kind of discussions, as an engineer, I see it all the time, that you can get into minutia of different aspects of a product and give a summary of what it is based on this and based on that makes it look totally different than what it really is. And when you look at this house, I think the picture that shows it best was the one that Dawn had in her presentation that showed the 3-deckers in Dorchester. That's what they want to put here. This is Cohasset Harbor, okay? Cohasset Harbor isn't Dorchester. It doesn't have 3-deckers all over the place. And when you look at at what's going on, they have an existing facility, existing house that has a floor space of 756 square feet. And it has a height that's only 21 feet tall. And it fits nicely into that environment. They want to say, we're going to move the back of the footprint back 3 feet closer to my aunt's house. We're going to move the front forward 5 feet because even though it's just a a porch, we're gonna call it the foundation. And they massively increase the footprint. And then they go up 16 feet higher than what's there. And they also are taking the base height and raising it 3 feet from what it is right now. These are all nice tricks that you can do to try to pull the wool over the eyes of people when you're making an argument. But when you sit back and take a look from the street and you say, what is there now? Right now, there is a very small, very, it fits into the neighborhood of a nice little house there. And what they want to do is make its volume more than 2.5 times greater. And it's a big billboard. It's not even a nice structure. It's taking a structure which has all sorts of gables and things and roofs, and it's making it a flat, big projection right in front of you, which is 2.5 times more volume. That's what they want to do. And that doesn't fit into Cohasset Harbor. And it's just wrong. The whole idea of a property on that is grandfathered is that property, if you need to do something to keep it updated, you can do it. You're supposed to stay in the same footprint. You're supposed to stay in the same basic concept of what's there and not totally destroy the town because you want to have a 2.5 times bigger facility with a big roof on the top as a big party zone, which if that's not inhabitable, I don't know what it is, because if they want to say no one will be up there, then it's not inhabitable. We'll make that part of the deal. And that's really what's happening here. And that's what the town has to understand is it's changing the character. It's
Okay,
changing.
why don't you and Don put your heads together and present a brief, if you will, on a lot of these points. I was unaware, pre-construction grade, by the way, in A2 is not 19 feet, it's 18 feet, according to the plan. And is that, so that actually adds another foot onto the overall building height. Is that your understanding, Jeff Hassett? Pre-construction grade is 18 feet or is it 14? I just heard a figure of 14 thrown out. You're muted. I can't. Jeff, you're muted.
Basically, one of the things I want to make sure of, we're not lawyers. We don't get involved. We haven't been involved in this, in the technical details, except we got this package when it went to before the board a few weeks ago. And we just looked at it and looked at it from a common sense standpoint.
Okay, well, I encourage you to.
If we have to get an
concerns
attorney, we'll
down.
get an attorney and make sure that we cover all the legalities of it. But I'm just saying from a standpoint of common sense, you don't take a small little place like that that's non-conforming to begin with and increase its volume by 2.5 times and say, this is staying within the whole idea of what conformance is supposed to be.
I hear your point, and I'm encouraging you to put that down in writing.
Yeah, we will.
And
I thank you for listening to us.
And then Jeff, you were muted, but the pre-construction grade is either at 18 feet, but I heard a 14-foot thrown out there. I don't know.
Yeah, the pre-construction grade is 17.9. I put together an 8.5 by 11 figure that calculates that pre-construction grade, and it was included as part of the application.
Okay, so when I calculated the roof height at 37.3 feet, it really is more like almost 39 feet.
What elevation are you measuring from?
Well, if I measure from 17.9, the 37.3, I'm on plan A2, starts at 19 feet. That's not how we start our.
Oh, but if you look on the other side of that same figure, it's measured 34 foot 3 inches from the pre-construction grade of 18.0, so within an inch, to the roof deck.
Oh, same plan.
Yeah, I can bring it up.
And Mr. Chairman, if you wouldn't mind me chiming in at the last minute, this is Carly Wariski chiming in. I just wanted to very quickly just respond to some of the comments that have been made, and just that we absolutely want to be in that location. I grew up right across the harbor. We absolutely have Cohasset Harbor's best interest in mind. And we are just trying to build a home that will fit our family where we can raise them. So I just wanted to respond with that quick comment.
Okay, good. So we have a couple of different perspectives here, and I want to sort of study the plans and come to grips with starting points of measurements and so on and so forth. But we shall see.
So the plan I'm sharing now shows the pre-construction grade at elevation 18.0.
Yeah.
Measured 34'3" to the roof deck.
And well, the 34.3 doesn't include the roof deck.
That's correct, to the decking.
Well, so we've got to include the roof deck, which is another 4 feet.
And that's
Mr.
also,
Chairman.
and that's also 3 feet above where the existing ground floor is. You raised the whole thing by 3 feet.
Okay, well, we've got plenty of time to go over facts and figures, but not here tonight.
I agree.
But I think some of these dimensions have to be recalculated or represented. I certainly don't agree with the 34 feet there, but that's a party of one. So I would make a motion that we continue this hearing until August 15th to consider points made by the masses, including the presentation, contrary points of view presented by the applicants, and we'll get a look at the well, it's habitable space. I mean, clearly they've got chairs and things on the roof deck, so the roof deck, in my estimation, counts, but I'm more than willing to consider a contrary point of view as to why that isn't habitable space. But as somebody suggested, that might have to be a condition. I don't know. That's a bridge in front of us. So I've made a motion to continue this hearing. We have a policy, both sides. Jeff knows this full well. Address more to the masses. Got to be given to the Board of Zoning 7 days in advance of our hearing. Don't try to cut it too close. If you're too late, we'll just have to continue or do something or not consider. So I'd rather not be in that position.
Understood,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
I've made a motion to continue until August 15th.
Second,
Carol Higginson seconded. Woody Chidick, aye.
Ed McMorris, aye.
Lee Darcey.
Michael Dickey, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Earl Higginson, aye.
Okay, was that accounted for everybody? Okay. So
Thank you.
that's moved and seconded. I've got two little quickies here. Approval of meeting minutes of June 7th and 27th. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to read them. I have. I've got a couple of one or two little grammatical things not worth taking time up here, but would propose to get those to Cassandra. Anybody have any substantive issues with the minutes as written?
I did not, Woody.
Okay. Yeah, I gotta say, Cassandra, your minutes are to your credit. It's a nasty job. Somebody has to do it, and you've done a nice one. Okay, our
Thank
next, sorry?
I was just saying thank you.
Oh, no. I don't know. We won't praise you every time, but have to keep you on your toes. Okay,
Keep
our
me
next
humble.
zoning board meeting is August 15th. Do we have a date for the September meeting? Tentative
don't-
date,
I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it is the 12th.
12th. Okay. Well, I would like to make a motion to tentatively approve September 12th as our next, as our following zoning board meetings, just so we can start to get that into our planning process. If it turns out the 12th is not feasible for one reason or another, we can change it.
It's a Monday.
The Monday?
Oh, perhaps it is not the 12th then.
Maybe it's the 13th. Okay, well, we'll
The
pick that Tuesday. Okay, and then we're off and running.
Mr. Chair, for what it's worth, August 15th is also a Monday.
What?
August 15th is because there were
There were some people who
vacations.
couldn't make the meeting,
Okay,
board
okay.
members. I believe, isn't that right?
correct.
Yeah, that, I certainly would have trouble on that week other than the 15th.
Yeah, I think that's why we ended up on the 15th, but let's not repeat that mistake. And in September, of course, there's
just-
always Labor Day, and that's,
I'm going to confirm right now. So I looked at the website. The scheduled date for the meeting for September is September 6th.
okay, yeah, that would be the first available Tuesday. Okay, so let's just confirm, tentatively set September 6th, Tuesday, September 6th as the date of our September meeting, which we can modify if we need to, if your calendars come up with conflicts. Do I have approval of the meeting minutes? Somebody want to make a motion to approve the 2 June meeting minutes?
Motion to approve the 2 June meeting.
Okay, made by Lee Darst, seconded.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded, all in favor, aye. Woody Chidick.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Earl Atkinson, aye.
Lee Darst, aye.
Michael Dickey, aye.
Matt
Okay.
Watkins, aye.
And I don't think we need a formal vote on a future meeting date, but tentatively, it'll be September 6th. I don't think there's any other,
I can take a crack at the Hobart one. Woody, I'm probably up on a decision.
yeah, I would appreciate that. I will do the the 46. Border Street. Again, draft form, and you're gonna, and Matt's gonna do the Hobart. Nothing to be done on Capizoli. We're not ready on this one for sure. The Lubitzes. Does somebody want to take a draft, a shot at that one? That seemed a little more cut and dried.
I can have a go, Woody.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Okay, so we will have those hearings, which are continued already, but we'll probably be prepared to discuss draft decisions in 3 of them. All right?
All right.
Happy boating, happy gardening.
Just
Whatever
need a
it is.
motion to adjourn officially.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second it.
Okay, moved and seconded, Woody Chidick, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Earl Atkinson, aye.
Lee Darst, aye.
Michael Dickey, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Okay, thanks very much.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Good night,
everybody.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night.